Aloha and welcome to Live at the Legislature, where each week during the legislative session we give you a chance to hear directly from your state senators about issues, concerns, and legislation here at the state capitol. Last week, House and Senate lawmakers introduced bills to begin the process of building a new stadium at Halawa. At the same time, recent reports show that it will cost tens of millions of dollars to keep the current stadium in use into the near future. Joining us to talk about the stadium proposal is Senator Glenn Wakai, who introduced the stadium bill in the Senate, and he represents the 15th District, which includes Kalihi, Mapunapuna, Salt Lake, Foster Village, and the airport. He is also the chair of the Energy and Economic Development and Tourism Committee in the Senate. Good morning, Senator.
Good morning. Thanks for having me, Richard.
Thank you for being here. There have been years of discussion about the stadium. There's been problems at Aloha Stadium for decades. Why all of a sudden the movement on the new stadium?
Well, it's not a sudden development. It's one that I've been talking about for at least a decade, and those before me have talked about it as well. I mean, we have a 44-year-old rusting relic there. It's time for us to buy something new that's much more manageable for our needs. I mean, building it a little smaller would be nicer. Instead of 50,000, maybe 35,000 seats, and have it multi-use. I mean, that thing is locked down into football configuration. Perhaps we can embrace rugby, soccer, drone racing, whatever the future might have for us, and have a multi-use stadium and facility versus what we have there at the moment.
Without the tricky reconfiguration that was the bane of Aloha Stadium from the beginning.
Oh yeah, whoever sold us that bill of goods back 44 years ago of lifting hydraulically and moving the stadium into a baseball configuration, that was sold to us as the wave of the future. We're the only one that bought into that ridiculous configuration.
So how much of the new stadium has been envisioned at this point? Is the footprint set? Do you know what you're going to have in terms of skyboxes, things like that?
It's going to be on 100 acres there. It's not going to be a standalone facility as we have now. It's going to have multi-use of restaurants, bars, shopping, theaters, museums, just an array of options there, which we don't have at the moment. In terms of the facility itself, I'm trying to promote the idea of why just have it as a 40,000 seat stadium? Why not put a driving range in there? Why not invite Top Golf to turn their luxury boxes into a driving range when it's not being operated and utilized? Why not put a shopping center and build it right into the stadium? The idea of the state and government building standalone features with one singular purpose, I think we need to really rethink that strategy.
Are you talking about something like they have in New Orleans where it's a convention center and stadium with hotels and whatnot, or mostly just retail?
Something more on the lines of LA Live. If you're familiar with Los Angeles, they have the Staples Center, and they have just a bevy of activity outside of the arena there. So something that's going to make that place dynamic. And you think about it, our #1 visitor attraction on this island is the Arizona Memorial. And what happens there? 1.8 million people go there on a bus, they see the memorial, they get on the bus, and they bail. Wouldn't it be great for us, we have a ready-made audience of 1.8 million people, to drag them across the street and invite them to eat, shop, dine, and spend money in the state?
This current proposal has some new funding mechanisms built in. Can you talk about that?
I don't want to bore the viewer, but essentially it's going to appropriate $35 million. 2 years ago, the legislature appropriated $10 million for the environmental impact statement as well as a master plan. That is in the works. Hopefully we'll get that done in about 2 years. If we are lucky enough to get the $350 million for this stadium with bond issuances as well as cash, then we can perhaps, if all goes well, we can green light this baby in 5 years.
And what would the total build out and the timeline be for a new stadium?
Well, I mean, Hawaii has always its stops and goes. If we could start moving dirt in 5 years, perhaps we could build the stadium out in 2 years. Of course, all of the ancillary development after that might take another 10 years. But the facility itself, hopefully, 2 years plus 5 years, 7 years down the road, we can have something that we can be proud of and can really make the people of Hawaii cheer about it.
Now, in the meantime, the estimates are $20 to $30 million to keep Aloha Stadium in use, to keep it safe for use into the near future. What about beyond that? I mean, if you're talking about 7 to 10 years to build a new stadium.
Well, that's why the idea of building a new stadium is even more pronounced. I mean, we're throwing $20 to $30 million a year into a stadium that is just rusting. It's not going to fix itself. And it's kind of like having a 74 Datsun. At a certain point, you just got to call it quits and buy a new car. I think we're well past the point of trying to refurbish and fix year after year, throwing $30 million into a hole for a stadium that eventually we're going to have to replace. So why not do it sooner rather than later?
I kind of hate to ask this question, I apologize, but large projects in the state are typically fraught. You know, everything from Aloha Stadium itself to rail. What can give us the people confidence that this is going to be done right, it's going to be done on time, on budget?
The biggest difference with this project is we envision it to be a PPP, a public-private partnership. And you look at rails, to me, part of its demise is the fact that there's no private money involved in that. It's going to be all taxpayer funded and ridership funded for operations. This new Aloha Stadium is going to be where we bring in a master planner to help us build out that entire area. Right now, the Aloha Stadium has an operating budget of $7 million. $4 million comes from the swap meet. That's their largest tenant. I certainly believe that we could be getting $40 million by leasing 100 acres of prime real estate in urban Honolulu to help pay for the stadium construction plus more. I mean, wouldn't it be great if we could start reducing taxes because our stadium has become such the economic engine that it provides us all that we need to provide in growing our government services for the people of the state.
Now, and what about other uses? Like you said, the major use of the stadium right now is the swap meet, and then we have UH football and occasional concerts. Are there plans in place to bring in more promoters or other types of events to keep the stadium full?
Well, surprisingly, the stadium turned a corner last year, and all of a sudden we have Bruno Mars, we have Cardi B, we have Snoop Dogg, we have the Eagles, we have Guns N' Roses, we have a whole bevy of opportunities. And you know what's interesting is there's a mud bog, or kind of I think it's called a mud bog, where cars just crush other cars. I mean, that thing sold out 2 shows. I didn't realize we had such a big, huge car vehicle destruction fan base in Hawaii. But the stadium is seeing much more utilization of that facility other than just purely football.
Okay, well, that's great. Thank you, Senator, for being here. Thank you for joining us, and thanks, Olelo, for giving us this time. We'll see you next time on Live at the Legislature.
Do you know your legislators? Visit capital.hawaii.gov and enter your street name to find detailed information about your representatives and senators. From your district number to the committees and current bills your legislators have introduced, this is an easy way to stay up to date with what is happening in your community. If you're looking for detailed information concerning Hawaii State Senate and House hearings, please visit olelo.org/gov-archives. Videos are arranged by date, with the most recent at the top of the list. You can also search the on-demand media library by typing keywords into the search box.
Are you looking for an easy way to get involved in the legislative process? Stop by the Public Access Room located in room 401 at the Hawaii State Capitol. The Public Access Room provides citizens of Hawaii's facilities, services, and equipment to enhance their ability to participate in the legislative process.
Aloha and welcome to the Houses segment of Live at the Legislature, where every week we sit down and talk to a bunch of articulate and talented members of the House of Representatives. This morning we have with us Representative Troy Hashimoto. He represents the Wailuku area on the island of Maui. And also joining us is Representative Amy Peruso. She represents the Waihewa Whitmore Village area on the island of Oahu. Thank you for being here this morning.
Thank you, Carolyn.
Thank you for having us.
So let's start with you, Representative Peruso. In putting your package of bills together for this session, what is it that you focused on?
I was really trying to be responsive to the concerns that I heard as I was canvassing. So I knocked on tens of thousands of doors, at least 10,000 doors, and I really heard concerns about an existential crisis facing us around climate change, growing social inequality, and crumbling infrastructure. So I tried to organize my legislative proposals in a way that addressed those concerns.
And what were some of those particular issues that?
I think that my focus was really on education, because that's my background, aloha aina, economic justice, and human rights.
And you, Representative Hashimoto, you were formerly the Chief of Staff to the Maui Council Chair Mike White.
That's right.
So you bring to the legislature this perspective of the day-to-day county issues. Is any of that reflected in some of the legislation that you introduced?
Absolutely. I think it's very important to realize the importance of home rule and especially the neighbor islands being able to take care of the top priorities that may be very different than what is happening here on Oahu. So I think, one of the biggest things that we're going to be dealing with is short-term rentals, and I think some of the legislation that I introduced will give the counties more power to deal with that on a local basis. Whether it's outright regulating short-term rentals from a county perspective, or giving them the tools to simply enforce. So I think those are very important priorities to help us with a broader goal of making sure that we have affordable housing available to many of our residents. I think that's the number one issue that I'm hearing as throughout the state, that's very important. So we need to approach it on various fronts, and I think short-term rentals is one of them. I think it's also giving resources and pushing it down to the county level to allow them to also work and help with the issues, also very important.
Well, there's been some tension sometimes between the counties and the state. Your presence here in the legislature, do you think you can be like the middleman, the guy who can make everybody be friends?
Well, I think it's always helpful to have someone with that perspective, and I think there are many others who also have that perspective. But you're right; it's really about finding that common ground, and I think we're still facing that right now in terms of how we're going to allocate the transient accommodations tax, and so that's going to be a very big issue that the counties continue to grapple over, especially with the neighbor islands having Kauai and the Big Island are having issues balancing their budget. So they're looking at revenue sources. And I think we have to be mindful of those needs and be sure that we give them the appropriate resources that are needed to operate the counties, because they do play an important role. They're complementary to the state. And I think when people look at government, they don't look at county or state, they look at one government. So I think government overall running well is to all of our benefit.
Representative Perusa, you are a former social studies teacher.
I am.
And your focus obviously has been on educational opportunity. Can you talk a little bit about one or two of the bills in that area that you are pushing for?
Sure. So I think in response to the teacher shortage crisis and the conversation we've been having for a few years actually around funding in public education and the failure of the constitutional amendment last year. I think it's really incumbent upon the legislature to kind of recognize our responsibility in that area and to address the crisis. So I do have one bill, House Bill 1285, that seeks to provide additional funding for public education through a small increase in the GET and then higher income taxes for the highest income earners. And then the other area that I'm really focused on is testing, so the over-testing that's still happening in our schools.
Well, in the funding for education, obviously the failure of the Con-Am brings up the question of how to best fund education in this state. And there have been people who have been saying, we need to hold the DOE accountable. We need to know that if we raise taxes or we give them more money, that none of it's going into a dark hole.
Right. And I think that the new approach to the budget adds an interesting dimension to that discussion this year. I do think, having worked within the system for a long time, that it's hard to imagine any hidden pots of money. And I think there are some discussions to be had around allocation of personnel and getting more teachers back into the classroom. But I think that our system is seriously underfunded overall. And I don't think that we're going to be able to fund the system adequately by finding waste. So.
You are the vice chair
Correct.
for higher education.
Correct.
But this brings my question to you. One of the bills that you've introduced. Well, first of all, Maui has a great. It's not a community college anymore. They changed it to it's a University of Hawaii at Manoa.
Slowly transitioning four-year
To a four-year
institution, right?
institution.
Yeah.
Let's talk, and it is a great school. So tell me a little bit. You have introduced a bill to help.
Well, yeah, I think, for the neighbor islands especially, there's not many options. And so I think we have to look at the university system as the way to help educate, and allow people to pursue opportunities. One of them does include education. Right now, you can't get an education degree and become a teacher on the neighbor islands very easily. And so I think one aspect of the teacher shortage is we just need to educate more teachers and get them certified. And there's no easy way to do that currently. So one of my bills that passed out of the Lower and Higher Education Committee on the House side pushes for distance learning to have a complete educational program online. Because if you're on Maui or Kauai, you can't really become a teacher easily, and so we need to change that. And as we get more volume, I think that's going to help our teacher shortage issue. We also have many different programs at Maui College that are kind of budding up, and they're being truly innovative in what they're trying to implement. And one of them is the Food Innovation Center. And so we're really fighting this year to get positions for the newly renovated Food Innovation Center that's coming up at Maui College. Last year we spent $7 million to renovate a building on the Maui College campus, and we're looking forward to make sure that we can get the people to run that facility.
Well, I hope that the folks on Maui are listening to you, because this guy is working really hard to get Maui College their money. I also wanted to say that you are brand new reps, and you've got a lot of work ahead of you. So thank you for being with us this morning. I appreciate that, and thank you all of you for joining us. We'll see you next week.
Do you know your legislators? Visit capital.hawaii.gov and enter your street name to find detailed information about your representatives and senators. From your district number to the committees and current bills your legislators have introduced, this is an easy way to stay up to date with what is happening in your community. If you're looking for detailed information concerning Hawaii State Senate and House hearings, please visit olelo.org/gov-archives. Videos are arranged by date, with the most recent at the top of the list. You can also search the on-demand media library by typing keywords into the search box.
Are you looking for an easy way to get involved in the legislative process? Stop by the Public Access Room located in room 401 at the Hawaii State Capitol. The Public Access Room provides citizens of Hawaii's facilities, services, and equipment to enhance their ability to participate in the legislative process.
Aloha and welcome back to Live at the Legislature, where every week we speak with members of the legislative, members of the House and Senate to talk about the pressing issues here at the state capitol. With us today to talk about a number of hot button issues is Representative Gene Ward. He's the minority leader representing District 17 from Hawaii Kai all the way to Kalama Valley. Good morning, Rep. Ward.
Good morning, Kyle.
So before we get into the bigger hot button issues, let's say, what were your thoughts on the senator's comments earlier about the stadium?
Everybody's thinking about the Super Bowl, and I think this is good, kind of the minority response to Senator Wakai and the stadium proposal, which was, I agree with everything except for one thing, and that was what he failed to mention. Everybody who saw the Super Bowl saw the huge Mercedes-Benz logo. They pay big money for naming rights, and there's no reason why taxpayers should have to pay all of the funds for this $250 or $300 million. So naming rights have got to be in there. Public-private partnerships have got to be in there, and there's no reason why it should be all on the taxpayer's burden. It's $30 million to just get the thing back to running. I agreed with all that. We should have a multiple, whether it's hotels or other sports complex. But the fact is that the Mercedes Center is where the Pro Bowl was. Everybody knows why did they do that? Well, it's because they paid good money. And there's no reason why Hawaiian Airlines, Qatar Ford, or Mercedes themselves could come in and do naming rights and call it Mercedes Aloha Bowl or the Mercedes or the Qatar Aloha Stadium, et cetera. I think that's wise use of taxpayers' money, and it's done all over the mainland. He mentioned the Stapleton Center. Why should we not do it? We should be the sports center of the Pacific. That was the other thing. We should have all the different sports, from soccer, golf, even, as he said, the monster cars. So well done, Senator Wakai, but get naming rights into that bill so we can save taxpayers some money.
Transitioning into another economic issue, the biggest one probably is going to be the minimum wage this year.
Oh, by the way, I thought you were going to say whether I won my bet on the Super Bowl.
Did you win your bet on the Super Bowl?
I won lunch from my daughter. But it was a great game.
Awesome.
It shows you the importance of playing defense.
Absolutely. So back to the minimum wage, there are two big issues. There was one heard on Thursday, which originally raised the wage up to 17 and then gave credits for businesses that provided the prepaid health care. The second being allowing the counties to set their own minimum wage standards. So this is something that I think you should know quite a bit about, given your business background. So maybe explain a little bit of that before we get into the issue itself.
Well, for 15 years, my wife and I were retailers at the Royal Hawaiian Hotel selling resort wear clothing. My wife is a designer, not only clothing, but now she's an interior designer. So I know what the minimum wage can do, what it can't do. And as I said in my opening day speech, if we are not doing it reasonable or in increments, we're going to have 4 consequences. The first of which is going to be a job killer. Those who are employers are either going to cut wages or literally cut jobs. That is not good. Our mom and poppers are already having a bit of a wobbly future. The second thing is that it's going to be the cost of living going to go up because the businesses have to pass it on to customers. So those who already know the cost of living is choking them and causing them to leave, it's going to hurt all the more from that. The third thing is it's going to encourage AI, artificial intelligence. It's going to bring on the robots. You know, we've got some of these places on the mainland that are totally fast foods run by robots. Elon Musk, the unions, everybody is aware of this. I've even introduced a bill for an AI task force sort of to monitor what's going on in artificial intelligence. And quite frankly, do we want the robots to take over? Or do we want the mainland chains that can afford higher wages to take over? And lastly, and this is probably the most important, market forces are already now adjusting the minimum wage upward. There are not enough people out there. There's the supply that's very low on talented and capable employees. They're stealing them from one another. And because of that, they're setting wages up. Just the fast food the other day was starting out at $12 to $13 just for getting first-time wait staff. So the market, the AI, the cost of living, and the job cutting really says we should be very careful and very sensitive about what we do with the minimum wage.
So given that the minimum wage is sort of a reaction to Hawaii's super high cost of living, a lot of working folks are having a hard time, making ends meet. What is the minority doing, or what have they been doing to also address this issue in a different way?
Well, we think there should be a training wage. There should be wages where people can get on-the-job training. We have a bill that says, stay home, you can get vocational training or training on a business, the way they do it in Switzerland. In effect, where you don't have to go to college, and because of that, you can get training within the context of a business. But the businesses, because they have to pay high wages, may be reluctant to train people, and because of that, their education will be set aside.
And another thing that the minority has been introducing for almost since I've been alive is exempting GET from food and medicine, and most recently, you folks just introduced also exempting feminine hygiene products from the GET. Why has this taken so long to become law?
And why has it not been heard so far, and why is it not gaining traction? Because somehow the voracious appetite of tax and spend in the state of Hawaii still makes food, which is a necessity for living, taxable. Medical services and I can't imagine feminine hygiene products having a tax on them. So these are things that we continually introduce, continually stick with. These are the right things to do. And when we talk about the poor who can't afford and have the high cost of living, well, we're just bumping the cost of living by making sure that they pay the GET tax, which is very, very regressive. Anytime we play with that tax, it's very regressive on the poor.
Transitioning very quickly, we've got a minute and a half left. There's a bill being heard today at 2:05, HB 1383, and that will be to decriminalize marijuana or cannabis. So I know that this is an issue that's sort of, diversity of opinion among the caucus itself, but what are your initial thoughts?
Well, we're flirting with, I think, putting a nosedive into our youth. Why I say that? Half of the polls that I've seen, and even in my district, half are for it, half against it. So I would speak for the 750,000 people, half the population of Hawaii, who are against it. Because I think it's a dangerous thing to disincentivize our youth for the sake of what otherwise seems to be a trend going nationally, but people probably don't know this, that California has 3/4 of their cities opting out of their decriminalization recreational marijuana. So a lot of people are saying, this is probably not good. We have 43% of, this is the Mothers Against Drunk Driving, 43% of all fatalities on our roads are drug related. We want to have more people carnage on the highway. Let's legalize marijuana. It's a bad thing. It fries the brain, particularly when those youth people who are spending 9 hours on their phone every day, you put them in an anaesthetize them with weed, marijuana, it's going to be all the more taking the zest out of life. Right now, there's always an increased suicide rate among our youth. The hopelessness and the kind of wandering around, I think this is the worst thing. Let the medical marijuana be, which I'm for, but for the legalization for our young people, it's the wrong way to go.
And for those wondering, that's HB 1383, which will be heard at 2:05 today in room 325.
I hope people will weigh in.
Rep. Ward, thank you for your time, and thank you to the viewers at Olelo. We will see you next week.